The battlefield was silent except for the soft crackle of dying fire. The frozen plains of Europa were littered with metal wrecks and broken dreams. Human soldiers and Xarian warriors had fought until nothing was left to burn. The war had turned the moon into a graveyard of steel and ice. Corporal David Hayes lay half-buried under snow and debris. His armor was cracked, his leg bleeding badly, and the air in his helmet hissed with every slow breath. He had no signal, no backup, and no hope. The cold bit into his bones like knives. He thought of Earth. Warm sunlight, ocean waves, and the smell of rain, things that felt like distant dreams now. The night sky above glowed red from far-off explosions. He could still hear the echo of screams through the comms. Broken, fading transmissions of soldiers calling for help that never came. The war had lasted too long. Every soldier on both sides had forgotten what peace even meant. David forced himself to move, dragging his body out of the wreck. His rifle was gone, his supplies almost empty. Every step was pain, every breath frost. He stumbled toward the shadow of a ruined ship for shelter, but before he could reach it, he heard something, a deep, rhythmic sound. Boots, heavy ones. His heart raced. Through the swirling snow, a tall figure appeared. It was a Xarian warrior. Her armor shimmered with strange light, full of alien markings that pulsed faintly. She moved with calm, deadly grace, holding a long spear that hummed with blue energy. David froze, his hand reaching for the small pistol at his belt, but he knew it was useless. The warrior turned her head, her helmet scanning him. For a second, time stopped. Then the helmet hissed open with a soft sound, revealing her face. She was unlike anything he had imagined. Her skin was a soft blue, her hair silver and braided, tightly, and her eyes, bright silver glowing faintly in the dark, looked straight through him. A scar ran from her left temple down to her jaw, a mark of battle. She raised her weapon. "You are human," she said, her voice firm but not cruel. Her accent was strange, her English broken but understandable. David tried to lift his gun, but his arm trembled. "And you're Xarian?" he said, his voice rough and tired. "Guess that makes us enemies." The alien woman stared at him for a long moment. The snow whirled around them. For a second, David thought she would kill him. That would be the end. A clean, quick death on a frozen world far from home. But then something unexpected happened. She lowered her weapon. David blinked, unsure if his mind was playing tricks on him. "You bleed," she said simply, noticing the blood on his leg. "You die soon." He gave a weak laugh. "Yeah, that's the plan." She tilted her head, studying him. "You do not beg?" David's lips curled into a faint smile. "Begging doesn't change fate." The warrior's silver eyes softened slightly. She stepped closer, then knelt beside him. Her armor hissed as it shifted, and from her belt she took out a small glowing capsule. Before he could react, she pressed it against his wound. David gasped. The capsule released warmth, sealing the bleeding instantly. The pain eased, replaced by a strange, tingling calm. Why did you do that?" he whispered. The alien looked at him. "Because you fight with heart. Not all enemies deserve to die." Her voice was quiet but carried weight. David stared at her, this being who should have killed him without hesitation, but instead she was saving him. There was confusion in his chest, mixed with gratitude and disbelief. The storm grew stronger, the wind howling around them. The alien warrior looked up at the sky. "Storm coming," she said. "You die here alone. Come." She lifted him easily, carrying him as if he weighed nothing. David's head rested against her cold armor, and his vision blurred. The last thing he saw before he passed out was the faint light of her eyes glowing against the storm. When he woke again, he was inside a small broken shelter, half of a crashed ship turned into a cave. There was a fire burning, warm and real. His leg was bandaged with strange alien cloth that shimmered in the light. The warrior sat nearby, sharpening her blade in silence. David tried to speak, but she raised a hand. "Rest," You need strength. He looked at her, the enemy who saved his life. In that moment, for the first time in the long, bloody war, David felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope and curiosity about the warrior who spared him. Her name, he would soon learn, was Raquela, and his life, from that night forward, would never be the same. When David woke the next morning, the storm outside still screamed like a living thing. Snow and dust slammed against the broken walls of the old wreck they had turned into a shelter. His head hurt, and his throat was dry. The fire had burned, low throwing shadows across the walls that danced like ghosts. Raquela sat near the entrance, her spear across her knees, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She didn't move when David stirred, only said in her quiet, rough voice, "You live." He managed a small smile. "Thanks to you." She turned her head slightly, her silver eyes watching him. "You speak many words, I not know all." He nodded, realizing the problem. Her English was broken, rough, simple. He wondered how much she really understood. "You saved me," he said slowly, pointing to himself, then to her. "You help me." Raquela blinked, then nodded. "Yes, help." He smiled. "Thank you." She tilted her head. "Thank you?" He touched his chest, repeating softly, "Thank you." She copied his gesture awkwardly. "Thank you." The sound of her saying those words, in her low, calm voice, made something warm stir inside him. It was strange how quickly the world outside disappeared when she was near. For a long while they sat in silence, sharing the same small warmth of the fire. Over the next few days, they survived together. The storm lasted endlessly, turning the world white. They had little food and less water, but somehow they made it work. Raquela hunted small ice beasts that wandered near the wreck. David helped her by fixing tools, melting snow, and cleaning her wounds. He learned her species could eat almost anything, but she still tried to share with him, cutting the food in half before giving it. Sometimes she would speak in her language low and musical, and he would just listen. The words meant nothing to him, but the sound of them carried a strange comfort, like listening to the sea through a shell. He, in return, told her about Earth, about blue oceans, green forests, and children flying kites in the wind. Raquela listened, her head slightly tilted, eyes soft. "Your world," she said one night, "sounds like dream." "It's real," David said quietly. "Or at least, it used to be, before the wars." She didn't answer for a long time, then she said, "My world once had peace too, before humans came." Her tone was not angry, only sad. David swallowed. "I didn't come here to destroy. I was just a soldier following orders." She looked at him then. Really, looked at him. "You not same as others," she said softly. "You have eyes that hurt." He smiled weakly. War changes everyone. On the fourth night, David woke to the sound of her breathing close by. The fire had gone out, and the temperature had dropped so low that frost formed on his eyelashes. He was shivering violently. Raquela noticed. Without a word, she reached out and pulled him closer to her. Her armor was cold, but her body underneath was warm, almost hot. Her skin gave off a faint glow, and her heart beat strong and steady against his side. David froze, unsure if he should move, but she whispered, warmth shared, both live. He nodded slightly, too cold to argue. Slowly, the shaking stopped. The rhythm of her breathing calmed him, and he drifted off again, safe in the arms of the enemy who should have killed him. When the storm finally ended, the world outside was silent again. Everything was buried under thick snow, sparkling under pale light. David limped outside, his wound healing thanks to her alien medicine. Raquela followed him, scanning the horizon. There was no sign of rescue, no ships, no soldiers, only them. He looked at her and said quietly, "Maybe we're the last ones left." Raquela didn't reply at first. Her eyes were on the empty sky. Then she said softly, "Maybe, This is better, David frowned. Better? She turned toward him, her expression unreadable. No war, no command, only live. He looked at her, this strange, fierce woman from another world, and realized she might be right. For the first time in years, there was no sound of battle. Just quiet. He smiled faintly. You know, for an alien, you make a lot of sense. She blinked, confused by his words but sensing his tone. Sense? He pointed at her, smiling. Smart. Raquela smirked slightly, the first real smile he had ever seen from her. Human also smart. Sometimes. He laughed. She didn't laugh often, but when she did, it was sharp and short, almost like a melody made of strength. In that lonely place, they began to teach each other, words, gestures, meanings. It was not just survival anymore. It was connection. They stopped being soldier and enemy. They became something else. Two lives tied by chance, by cold, by silence. And though David didn't know it yet, that fragile bond between them was about to become something far deeper, something that would change both their worlds forever. Days passed, but the world outside remained frozen and silent. The storm had vanished, leaving the wrecked landscape of Europa covered in a thick layer of ice. The sky was pale, the stars sharp and bright, like distant shards of glass scattered across the heavens. David and Raquela had grown accustomed to each other's presence. They no longer needed words for everything. A glance, a gesture, a simple motion was enough to communicate. They shared meals silently, hunted together, and tended to wounds without speaking. Every day the distance between soldier and warrior lessened, replaced by a fragile, growing trust. David noticed details he had never thought about before. The way Raquela's eyes reflected light, turning silver in the fire. The small movements she made when she thought no one was watching. The quiet strength in her body, a power honed by war, yet tempered by intelligence and patience. And yet for all her strength she seemed lonely. One evening, after they had huddled together to share the small warmth of the fire, David spoke. Do you ever miss your world? Raquela tilted her head, eyes on the distant horizon. Always, she said. But home is gone now. Only memory. David nodded, understanding the weight of loss. He had lost friends, comrades, and almost his own life on this cold moon. He had thought he understood pain, but her quiet sorrow, the emptiness behind her glowing eyes, made his own wounds feel small. I used to think survival was all that mattered, David whispered. But now, maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's about who stands with you when nothing else remains. Raquela looked at him then, really looked. And in that moment, something shifted. The air between them thickened, charged with emotion neither fully understood. The night grew colder, and the fire burned low. David shivered, and Raquela moved closer without a word. Her body radiated warmth, a living shield against the harsh ice. He felt her hand brush his arm. He didn't move away. You trust me? She asked softly. David met her gaze. I do. Her lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. Then, the storm outside seemed to vanish completely as they sat together, two beings from worlds that had fought endlessly, finding comfort in each other. The firelight danced on her armor, and the glow from her eyes softened. No one had ever touched David like this, not in the barracks, not on any battlefield. Her hands were strong but gentle, and her presence calmed the storm raging in his mind. He had lived with death for so long, and now he felt alive. Raquela leaned closer, her breath brushing against his ear. He could feel the rhythm of her heart, steady and sure, and it mirrored the rhythm that had stopped in him long ago. Without words, they connected. Two lives that should have been enemies, now intertwined. That night, they shared warmth, not just from the fire, but from something deeper. David traced the lines of her scar with his fingers, feeling the history of battles and pain. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her like a life he never wanted to let go of. They didn't speak of what they were doing. There was no need. Actions had become words. Every touch, every breath, every heartbeat was communication. And in the silence of that frozen moon, they became more than survivors. They became one. When dawn finally broke, casting pale light across the ice, they lay together quietly, exhausted but peaceful. The war was still out there, somewhere in the distance, but for the first time in years it felt far away. David realized he no longer feared death. Not if it meant moments like this. Not if it meant being with Rakala, the warrior who had saved his life and captured his heart. And Rakala, for her part, felt a strange foreign warmth in her chest. She had fought countless battles, lost comrades, and seen countless enemies die. But never had she felt something like this: connection, trust, and something she did not have a word for in her language. The night they became one was not just a night of passion. It was a night of trust, of shared strength, and of understanding. Two warriors from opposite sides of the galaxy had found a bond that neither battle nor distance could break. As the Aoiu sun touched the horizon, melting frost in streaks of gold, David whispered almost to himself, "I will never forget you." Rakala only looked at him, eyes shimmering in the new light, and said softly, "Nor I, human." And for a long moment the universe, war-torn and cold, seemed to pause. Two hearts, once enemies, beat as one under alien stars. It was a beginning that neither of them could have predicted, born from death, frost, and the strange mercy of a single choice: to spare a life. That night, the battlefield faded from their minds. Only the warmth, the connection, and the fragile promise of tomorrow remained. For in that silence, they had found something greater than survival. They had found each other. The sun rose slowly over the frozen plains of Europa, casting long shadows across the wreckage. David and Rakala had spent the night wrapped in each other's warmth, but the world outside was waking again. The distant hum of engines cut through the quiet like a knife. Human dropships were approaching, their engines vibrating the ice beneath the ground. David sat up, alarmed. "They're here," he said, his voice tense. "They came for me." Rakala stood, her silver eyes scanning the horizon. Her hands instinctively went to her weapons, but she didn't raise them. She looked back at David. "You go," she said softly. "I'm not leaving you," he shouted. Panic rose in his chest. "You saved my life. You are human," she interrupted, her voice firm. "They will see me. Kill me. I cannot survive with you." David's chest tightened. The weight of reality pressed down on him. He had hoped that somehow, after all they had been through, they could face the world together. But she was right. Their worlds were enemies. The humans would not understand. They would see her as a threat. "You saved me once," he said, voice breaking. "Let me save you now." Rakala shook her head. "You cannot. You must survive. That is all that matters." The dropships landed in clouds of icy vapor. Soldiers poured out, their weapons scanning for any sign of life. David moved forward instinctively, ready to meet them, ready to explain. But the reality struck him. Rakala had been with him all this time, hidden from view, and now she would vanish. She stepped close to him. Her hand brushed his cheek, a touch lighter than any he had ever felt. "Remember me," she whispered, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "Not as warrior, not as enemy, as one who gave you life when death was near." David wanted to hold her forever. He wanted to beg her to stay, to fight the universe itself if he had to. But he knew it would be pointless. She was right. And yet a deep, aching part of him refused to let her go. The soldiers noticed movement behind the wreck. David turned, ready to shield her, but Rakala already melted into the shadows. Swift, silent, perfect. She was gone before anyone could react. David ran after her, calling her name, but the wind carried it away. "Rakala?" Only the snow answered. The silence of the frozen world returned, heavier than before. A soldier grabbed David's arm. "Corporal Hayes, we've got you. You're safe now." He looked at them, but his vision blurred. Safe? He had been saved, yes, but at what cost? The one person who mattered most, the one who had given him warmth in a world that had forgotten kindness, was gone. He struggled against them, trying to look into the distance, to find even a hint of her silver eyes. But there was nothing. Nothing but snow, ice, and the memory of her touch. That night, on the ship back to Earth, David sat alone in the corner of the cabin, staring at his hands. Every scar on his body reminded him of the battlefield, but every ache in his chest reminded him of Rakala. He could still feel her warmth. He could still hear her voice in the wind. He wondered if she was alive, somewhere beyond the ice, alone as he had been. He wondered if she thought of him. He wondered if the connection they had formed in the cold, shelter in the frozen silence of war, had meant anything to her at all. The stars outside the viewport seemed distant, indifferent. He wanted to believe that somewhere she was watching the same stars and thinking of him too. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the war finally ended. Europa's icy plains were abandoned. Reports called it Operation Frost End. David was hailed as a survivor, a hero. But inside he felt empty. No medals, no commendations, no words from the world could replace what he had lost. Her. He would never forget her. The memory of her silver eyes, the curve of her scar, the sound of her voice would haunt him forever. The warmth they had shared, the trust they had built in a frozen wasteland was etched into his heart. Sometimes, in quiet moments, he would close his eyes and imagine her walking toward him across the ice. He would imagine her reaching out, smiling softly and saying, "You survived. You lived. Remember me." And in those moments, David knew, though their paths had diverged, though the universe had torn them apart, a bond had been forged that not even war could destroy. It was a goodbye, yes. A cruel, heartbreaking goodbye. But it was also a promise, unspoken and eternal, that somewhere, in the vastness of space, Rakala and David were connected, tied by a night of survival, trust, and the fragile beginnings of something deeper. And though he didn't know it yet, their story was far from over. The war was over. Europa's icy plains were abandoned, the ruins buried under years of snow and ice. Humanity rebuilt, healed, and moved on. But David Hayes never truly returned to a normal life. He walked among Earth's crowds as if he were a ghost. Streets were alive with light and color, children laughing, oceans shimmering under the sun, all the things he had dreamed about during the frozen nights on Europa. Yet, nothing felt the same. He had survived, yes, but a part of him remained on that cold moon with her. David tried to bury the memory. He went back to civilian life, took a quiet job at a repair dock by the sea, fixing ships and machinery. The work was steady, and the repetitive motions helped him silence the voices in his mind, the echo of explosions, the screams of soldiers, the howling wind of that frozen battlefield. He met people. He tried to love again. He dated, he smiled, he laughed. But no one could reach the part of his heart that belonged to Rakala. He could still feel her hand on his cheek, still hear her soft voice in the silence of the night, still see her silver eyes glowing in the dark. Every night he dreamed of her. Not as a warrior, not as an enemy, but as herself. Alive, breathing, smiling. She would appear in his dreams across alien landscapes, running through golden fields or standing on hills under twin suns, always looking at him with that same intensity he could never forget. Sometimes he would wake in a cold sweat wishing the dream were real, and sometimes he would feel something else. A strange warmth in his chest, a quiet pulse that told him life could still surprise him. Years passed. David grew older, his hair graying at the temples, his face lined from time and worry. The war became stories in books, memories in documentaries. He would watch them silently, thinking of her, wondering if she had survived the battles after they were separated. Then one night the sky above the coast split open with light unlike any sunrise he had ever seen. A strange hum vibrated the air, deep and resonant, making the water ripple. David stepped outside, instinctively drawn to the noise. A ship, sleek, unlike any human design, descended slowly onto the beach. Its surface shimmered with colors he had never seen, pulsating softly in rhythm with the waves. The air smelled of ozone and something alive, something not from Earth. And then, stepping out of the shimmering doorway, was her, Rakala, alive, stronger, calmer, yet carrying the same fire in her silver eyes. David froze, unable to speak. His heart raced, threatening to burst from his chest. Years of longing, of silent nights, of wondering and hoping, condensed into this one moment. But he wasn't alone. Behind her, a small figure stepped forward. A child. Human in shape, yet with faint blue skin and eyes that shimmered like her mother's silver. The boy looked at David with curiosity, innocence, and a spark of life that made David's chest ache with emotion. David's hands shook as he fell to his knees. Is this? His voice caught. Rakela knelt beside the child. Our son? She said softly, her voice carrying the weight of years and the strength of her decision. I came far, human. He asked, about you. The boy took a tentative step forward, reaching for David. David's heart ached with love, fear, and awe all at once. He had imagined this moment for years, but now it was real, more than he could have ever dreamed. He touched the child's small hand, and the warmth, the life, the connection hit him like a wave. You're ours, he whispered, tears blurring his vision. Rakala's silver eyes softened, glimmering under the pale moonlight. Yes, ours, she said. Her hand brushed his cheek, as gentle as the first time he had felt her touch. I wanted to come sooner, but the stars are far, and our path is not easy. David could only nod, swallowing the lump in his throat. Words felt meaningless now. This moment, this miracle, this impossible reunion said everything. They sat together on the beach as the waves lapped at their feet. The child ran ahead, laughing, exploring the sand with wonder. David watched him, memorizing every movement, every sound, every detail. This was life, their life, born from the chaos of war, the courage of mercy, and the impossible love of two souls who should have been enemies. For the first time in years, David felt peace. For the first time in years, hope filled the empty spaces inside him. The universe had taken much from him, friends, comrades, years of youth. But it had given him this, a second chance, a family, a bond that transcended worlds. And as he looked at Rakala, standing beside him, strong, radiant, and alive, he realized that love, human courage, human heart could survive anything. Even war, even distance, even time. The night was quiet, but David's soul was full. Their story was far from over, and he knew, without a doubt, that the universe had saved him once again, this time in the form of silver eyes, soft skin, and the laughter of a child who carried both their worlds in his heart. The storm above the ocean had passed, leaving a strange calm over the coast. The stars shimmered faintly, reflecting on the restless waves. David walked along the edge of the water, hands deep in his pockets, thinking of nothing and everything at once. Then a faint hum vibrated through the air like the world itself was singing. He froze. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard, not human, not any machine on Earth. It was alive, resonating in his chest. His heart raced and his breath came faster. Slowly a shape appeared in the distance, glowing faintly under the moonlight. A ship. Sleek, elegant, moving silently as if it were part of the sea itself. David's legs trembled. He recognized the presence before he even saw her clearly. The air carried something familiar, impossible yet undeniable. Then she stepped out. Rakala. Alive. Her silver eyes glimmered like stars, her blue skin shining faintly under the moon. Her hair flowed loosely, braided strands catching the light, giving her a regal, ethereal presence. David's breath caught in his throat. He could not believe his eyes. He had dreamed of this moment for years, imagined it countless times in the dark corners of his mind. But now she was real. "Rakala," he whispered, his voice trembling. She met his gaze. "David," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of years, the calm strength of one who had survived the impossible. Then he saw the child, small, tentative, stepping carefully from behind her. The boy's skin was faintly blue, his eyes bright silver like hers. He looked at David with curiosity, innocence, and a quiet confidence that came from knowing this man was his father. David froze. His knees went weak. "Our son?" he breathed. Rakala knelt beside the boy. "Yes," she said, a small smile on her lips. "I came far, human. He asked about you. He wanted to know who his father is." David's heart swelled until it felt like it might burst. The years of longing, of endless nights spent dreaming of her, came crashing over him. He dropped to his knees, reaching for the boy, his hands shaking. The child took a cautious step forward, and David gently lifted him into his arms. The warmth, the life, the tiny heartbeat pressed against his chest. It was more than he had ever hoped for. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered, "You're real. Both of you are real." Rakala watched quietly, standing behind them. Her eyes glimmered, not with battle fury, but with relief, love, and something David could not name but recognized instantly. She had carried him in her heart through impossible distances, through galaxies and stars, just as he had never stopped carrying her in his own. David held the child, feeling the weight of their bond. "I don't even know what to say," he murmured, his voice catching. "I thought I lost you. Forever." Rakala's voice was soft. "You did not lose me. I survived. We survived. And now?" She gestured to the boy. "This is our gift, our proof that life can continue, even after death, even after war." David smiled through his tears, rocking the child gently. "Our son, he's beautiful." The boy giggled, reaching up and touching David's face. The sound was pure, untouched by fear or war, and David laughed despite himself. It was the first time he had laughed in years without shadows following him. Rakala stepped closer, brushing David's cheek with her hand. Her touch was warm, gentle, and steady. "You will teach him about Earth," she said. "I will teach him about my world. He must know both sides, both strengths, both love." David nodded. "I will. I promise." They stood together on the moonlit beach, three beings who had once been separated by war, by distance, by impossibility, now united. The wind carried the faint scent of alien metals and ocean salt, mingling in a strange harmony. David could feel the universe itself hum with life and connection. Rakala smiled faintly. "He is brave, like his father," she said, watching the boy run along the water's edge. "He carries strength from both of us." David took her hand in his. "And he will never be alone," he whispered. "Because we will always be here, together." She nodded, her silver eyes glimmering in the moonlight. For a moment, the years of separation, the pain, the longing, it all seemed to vanish. There was only this night, this family, this impossible gift that life had granted them. The boy ran toward them, laughing, and David caught him, spinning him around. The sound filled the quiet night, echoing across the waves and into the stars. It was a sound of hope, of life, and of a love that defied worlds. And for the first time in years, David knew, with certainty, that the impossible was real. That love, human courage, and trust could survive across the stars, and even bring two worlds together. They were together, they were alive, and their story was just beginning. The night had settled over the coast, quiet and calm. The waves lapped gently against the shore, carrying the faint hum of distant stars. David watched his son run across the sand, tiny feet kicking up grains of moonlight, laughter spilling like music into the air. The child's silver eyes shone like his mother's, reflecting both worlds he belonged to. David's heart ached with love and awe. For so long he had wandered through life carrying the memory of Rakala, wondering if he would ever see her again, and now she was here, alive, standing strong beside him. And they had something even greater. A son, a living proof of their bond, of life triumphing over death, of hope surviving against the odds. Rakala knelt in the sand, watching their son chase waves. Her silver eyes softened as she saw the boy laughing freely, untouched by fear, untouched by the horrors of war. David stood behind her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. She leaned slightly against him, and he felt her warmth, her steady heartbeat, and the quiet strength that had drawn him to her years ago. "He is brave," Rakala said softly. "Strong, curious, he has both our worlds in him." David nodded. "He will learn both worlds," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Earth and yours. He will know courage. He will know love, and he will know that life can survive even the darkest wars." Rakala turned to him, her expression serious but gentle. "He must know humans are strong," she said. "Your heart, your spirit. It survives even against the stars." David swallowed hard. She was right. He had survived Europa, the war, and years of longing. Humanity's strength was not just in weapons or technology. It was in love and courage and trust and the ability to risk everything for others. And now this child, half human, half Zarian, would carry that strength forward. The boy ran back to them, holding a small shell he had found in the sand. "Look, Papa," he shouted. "I found treasure." David laughed, taking the shell and examining it. "Treasure," he repeated, smiling. Yes, it is treasure." He looked at Rakala. "This treasure is ours." Rakala smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Our lives are our treasure," she said quietly. "And this child, is the bridge between worlds." David felt tears prick his eyes. He thought of all they had lost, the battlefield, the comrades, the endless nights of longing. Yet here they were, alive, together, with a future that no war could take away. He knelt beside Rakala, wrapping his arms around her. The warmth of her body, the steady rhythm of her breathing, reminded him of the nights they had shared on frozen Europa. The world had tried to separate them, to tear them apart. But the human heart, he realized, was unstoppable. It could endure anything, pain, distance, time, and still find its way back to love. Rakala rested her head against his chest. "We have found each other again," she whispered. "And now, we protect him, together." David nodded. "Together," he echoed. The boy climbed onto David's shoulders, laughing, holding tight as David lifted him toward the sky. "Look, Papa, I touch the stars." David laughed, his heart swelling with pride and joy. "Yes, son, reach for the stars. They belong to you, just like both our worlds." The three of them stood on the shore, bathed in moonlight. Humanity's greatest strength had revealed itself, not in weapons, not in war, but in love, courage, and resilience. A single human heart had endured, had risked, and had survived across worlds, creating a bond that even the universe could not break. David looked at Rakala, at their son, and felt a deep certainty. This was proof that humans were more than survival machines, more than soldiers. They were hearts that dared to love, spirits that refused to break, and minds that could build bridges between stars. The child ran ahead again, giggling, chasing the reflections of stars on the wet sand. David and Rakala followed, hands intertwined, hearts full, lives intertwined with the impossible, the miraculous, the human. For in the end, it was not the wars, not the distance, not the impossible odds that mattered. It was love. It was courage. It was the human heart enduring, reaching, and creating life, even in the coldest, darkest corners of the universe. And there, on a quiet earth beach, a human and alien warrior and their child stood together under the stars. Humanity had survived not because of strength of arms, but because of the strength of the heart. The boy laughed, the waves sparkled, and the silver eyes of mother and child mirrored the endless promise of tomorrow. And David knew without doubt that the greatest victory of all had nothing to do with war. It had everything to do with love, trust, and the courage to endure, the true power of being human. The end.